From Anshe Sfard, Bethel Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Genesis and evolution, Bereshit and evolution. As we read the story of the Torah, 6 days of creation, Shabbat on the seventh, we're sometimes conflicted. What about the notion of evolution? The world being millions of years old, how do we deal with this conflict? One of the first issues is, what is the nature of the Torah story? Is the Torah a storybook? In fact, one could argue that it definitely is not. The Torah would never tell the story of creation in two totally different ways if it was a storybook, if it was a history book. First, it tells us that the animals, plants, and all that came first, and then man was created on the seventh day. That's Genesis chapter 1. In Genesis chapter 2, it says that no shrub of the field was made on the earth until Adam Ayin, because there was no man to work the land. That man came first, the Garden of Eden came second. If this was a storybook, this would be a contradiction. Since it's more about ideas, therefore, many have explained the great meanings behind this apparent contradiction, and therefore, the Torah is telling us ideas, not simply stories. It's not a storybook. It's about our relationship with God. That's what the Torah is all about. Then we're bothered by the notion that somehow we descend from the apes or we descend from the mosquito. And in fact, nothing should be uncomfortable about that. There is the idea that in the Genesis 1 that beast came first, man came second. The Midrash, in fact, says that the purpose of this is to humble us, to recognize that indeed the animal was here before us, the mosquito was here before us, as the Tosefta says in Sanhedrin. In fact, we are not greater than animals if we don't live a life that's exemplary. The Gemara in Psachim says that you have no right to eat animals if indeed you're an Am Aretz, if indeed you have no Torah in your life. So in fact, the human being is similar, as the Gemara says in Chagiga, similar to angels, but similar to animals as well, in as much as we eat and defecate and reproduce. We are like animals. We shouldn't be ashamed of that. The Torah is actually telling us we have an animalistic side. We have to watch out for that side. Then there's the problem of allegory. If indeed the world was not created 5773 years ago, then is the Torah simply an allegory? Surely there are dangers in the notion of allegory. The Rabbi already warned us that an allegory, things are allegorical. Who knows what else could be taken as allegory? Christianity allegorized much of Judaism, much of the Torah. So there is a danger in using too much allegory. But we know there is some allegory in the Torah. When it says God's mighty hand, his nose flared, the Song of Songs, many things indeed are allegory. So the 6 days of creation needn't be much different. They can indeed be allegory. We know that in Bereshit Rabbi, in the Midrash, it says that God was Borei Olamos Machrivan, that there was a time before that first day that God made many worlds. In Avot Rabbi Natan, in the post-Talmudic book of Avot, of the sages' sayings, it says 974 generations before he created the world, the Torah was lying in his bosom and he sang songs with the angels. In other words, the beginnings of the Torah were many generations before. There were generations prior to Adam and Eve. That there are many such obscure midrashim that speak of the world being very, very old. The notion of the Garden of Eden being an allegory, this is an old idea. It's even in the Midrash, you have the idea that the earth was outformed. This is Babylonia. It's Vavohu. This is Media. The darkness is the Greeks. The notion of allegory for the Garden of Eden story, although very controversial, there were many great philosophers who did take the Garden of Eden in that way. No reason not to take the 6 days in that way as well. Rav Sadia Gaon set down the major principle: allegorical interpretation is permissible if the text contradicts reality. If there are dinosaurs, if there is evolution, than, of course, divinely inspired, directed evolution, an evolution that without the divine hand would never happen. But if there is a reality to some sort of evolution, then in fact, the Torah cannot contradict it. If the Torah is true, and if science is true, and I have every reason to believe that both are true, then I must resort to allegory. Otherwise, God forbid, the Torah is not true. And that's not a possibility in the way of our thinking. The notion that somehow the idea of evolution or science somehow challenges our faith. On the contrary, the notion that there is a genetic code that can take us from all the way from an amoeba to me by mere genetic mutations, the very notion there is such a code. This is unbelievable, that there's a code the length of a long book, a very, very long series of books that makes me who I am, makes a blade of grass what it is, a monkey what it is. The very notion that there is this genetic potential to go in this direction or that, this itself is a symbol of the divine genius of the creation, far from being a challenge to religion. It should strengthen our faith that the world is made, that the human being is made with such wisdom, and that one can evolve from one thing to the other. This is amazing. And of course, we're not married to scientific theories, but we are also not going to deny them. So then there's a problem. Question is, well, if you interpret things not literally, then what's Shabbos? I mean, Shabbos is so central to Judaism. If the 6 days are a metaphor, what do we do? It's not a problem. Shabbos is the metaphor of the seventh day of 6 metaphorical days, 6 metaphorical periods. So what's the problem? Shabbos represents the rest of God and the celebration, as the Shilto says, celebration of the creation of the human being, which is told in the metaphor of 6 days in the Torah. So we celebrate that on the 7th. What about Adam HaRishon? It says that God created man. So what does that mean? So Rav Yaakov Meidan of Yeshivat Har Etzion said something, and I think from there we can answer the question. He said, what is the Torah? Why does it begin with creation and Adam? And why does it end with the destruction of a temple in the book of Kings? And the answer is, Torah is about a human being's relationship with God. That began 5773 years ago with Adam. That was concluded in a certain very intense way with the destruction of the temple. That will be renewed, God willing, with the coming of the Mashiach, the Messiah, one day. And therefore, any Neanderthal man or any kind of pre-man that existed, the Torah has zero interest in recording it and discussing it. Where Torah is not about cavemen, the Torah is about our relationship with God. And we would believe that it was 5773 years ago with Adam. There was a person from whom we all descend, and that's an important point. We are all brothers and sisters. We all descend from him, and he was the first to have a relationship with God, and it was these types of creatures, of which we are one, which were able to have a relationship with God. So there are many challenges. All the details still have to be worked out. We can't discuss it simply in 10 minutes for Torah. But a person should not feel any conflict between science, which is about describing the world, and religion, which is about the great questions of why, what are we doing here, how did we get here? The ridiculous proposition that we're here by some accident. They're running around the whole universe looking for this accident to happen somewhere else. Maybe they'll find it, maybe they won't. But the fact is, ain't no accident. It's the divine wisdom that makes this whole system possible. You can go from a big bang to the human being who can discover that very theory of evolution itself. It's an amazing thing, the development of the human being from the mosquito, from the amoeba, from the beginnings of creation. It's amazing. A Jew shouldn't feel challenged by evolution. A Jew shouldn't feel the need to somehow dismiss it, put it under the table, step on it. A Jew should feel that science, reason, facts that we know, dinosaur bones that we see, and the Torah, they're both a matter of truth. There can be no contradiction between two truths. I've proposed some ways of dealing with it. Surely there are others as well. Idach Zil Gemor, go and learn, read more about it. Thank you for joining us here at our discussion of Parshat Bereshit, idea of Genesis and evolution. Come each week and discuss further Parshiot discussions Torah, holidays, and how to Judaism. Thank you to Jason Lefkowitz for his technical assistance always, and thank you for joining us.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.